When a billionaire developer's $20 million empire began crumbling at midnight, the last person she expected to find beneath the collapsing beams was a man in worn jeans with nothing but a flashlight and a measuring tape. By dawn, her building stood. By sunrise, he had vanished. Now she's hunting this ghost who saved her fortune, only to discover he's a single father who leaves work every day at 2:30 sharp, drives a decade-old truck, and might be the only person alive who can destroy the corruption threatening to bury them both. If you're enjoying this story, drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this tale travels. And don't forget to hit that like button. The first crack appeared at 11:47 p.m. Victoria Hale heard it from 3 floors below, a sound like thunder trapped inside concrete, rolling through the skeletal framework of what was supposed to be Savannah's crown jewel of waterfront development. $20 million of steel, glass, and architectural ambition, and it was singing the song of its own destruction. She stood in the half-finished lobby, phone pressed against her ear, listening to her head contractor explain why he couldn't possibly get anyone on site until morning. Around her, temporary work lights cast harsh shadows across exposed beams and unfinished walls. The building groaned again, deeper this time, and dust sifted down from somewhere in the darkness above. "Morning might be too late," Victoria said, her voice tight. She ended the call before he could offer another excuse. 42 years old, founder and CEO of Hale Development Corporation, she'd built an empire on the principle that problems were just opportunities wearing ugly masks. But structural failure at midnight in an empty building? That was a different species of crisis entirely, the kind that could sink a company before sunrise. Her bodyguard, Marcus, shifted uncomfortably near the entrance. "Ma'am, the structural engineer said we should evacuate. The temporary supports on the 4th floor are—" Another crack, louder this time, cut him off. Somewhere above them, metal scraped against concrete with a sound that made Victoria's teeth ache. "I'm aware of what they are," she said. "I'm also aware that if this building comes down tonight, the insurance investigation alone will tie up my company for 2 years. We have investors flying in from Atlanta at 8 a.m. to see a construction miracle, not a construction disaster." She walked toward the temporary stairs, heels clicking against the concrete slab floor. Marcus moved to follow, but she held up a hand. "Stay here. If something falls, I need someone alive to tell people I died doing something characteristically stubborn." "That's not funny, ma'am." "It wasn't meant to be." The stairs were plywood and 2x4s, installed by the lowest bidder and designed for workers in steel-toed boots, not executives in Louboutin. Victoria climbed anyway, one hand on the rough wooden rail, phone flashlight in the other. The building creaked around her like a ship in a storm. 4th floor. The problem was supposed to be here. Temporary shoring that hadn't been installed correctly or hadn't been installed at all, depending on which version of the story she believed. Her head contractor blamed the structural engineer. The structural engineer blamed the contractor. The insurance company blamed everyone and threatened to blame no one, which somehow felt worse. Victoria stepped onto the 4th floor and immediately understood why people used words like catastrophic. The temporary support columns, massive steel posts that were supposed to hold the weight of the floors above while permanent supports were installed, were tilted. Not slightly. Noticeably, terrifyingly tilted, like trees in a storm that hadn't quite decided whether to fall. The beams they were supposed to support sagged in the middle, and she could see stress fractures spiderwebbing through the concrete. Her breath caught. She'd seen buildings fail before, in photographs and investigation reports. This was what the beginning looked like. "You shouldn't be up here." Victoria spun, nearly dropping her phone. A man stood 20 feet away, partially hidden in shadow. He held a flashlight in one hand and what looked like a small tablet in the other. He wore jeans, work boots, and a faded gray t-shirt that had probably been black before 1,000 washes. Early 40s, maybe. Dark hair, serious eyes, and the kind of calm expression that suggested he'd either seen this before or had nerves made of something stronger than steel. "Who are you?" Victoria demanded. "This is a restricted site. How did you—" "The gate was open," the man said simply. He moved forward, and his flashlight beam swept across the tilted support columns. "And someone needs to fix this before it kills somebody." "I have people coming in the morning?" "Morning's too late." He walked past her without waiting for permission, studying the supports with the intensity of a surgeon examining a patient. "These columns are under-torqued and off-center by at least 4 degrees. The beam loading shifted about 6 hours ago. You've got maybe 3-4 hours before the redistribution causes a progressive collapse. Victoria felt her stomach tighten. Are you an engineer? Among other things. He crouched beside one of the tilted columns, running his hand along the base where it met the floor. Someone installed these wrong. Deliberately wrong, if I had to guess. That's impossible. I have inspectors, oversight. You have paperwork, the man interrupted, not unkindly. Reality doesn't care about paperwork. He stood brushing dust from his hands. You have a forklift on site? Heavy-duty hydraulic jacks? Torque wrench rated for structural bolts? Victoria's mind raced. In the equipment cage. But I can't just let a stranger... Then it falls, the man said with a shrug. Your choice. But if I were you, I'd make it fast. That beam sounds angry. As if on cue, another deep groan rolled through the building. The man didn't flinch. He just stood there, watching her with patient, calm eyes. Victoria made the choice every instinct screamed against. Marcus, she called down the stairs. Bring up the equipment cage keys now. 20 minutes later, Victoria watched a stranger save her $20 million investment with nothing but a hydraulic jack, a torque wrench, and the kind of methodical precision that suggested he'd done this approximately 1,000 times before. He worked in silence, repositioning the tilted columns one careful inch at a time, checking measurements on his tablet between each adjustment. The process was agonizingly slow. Each time he pumped the jack, the building groaned in response, and Victoria found herself holding her breath. What's your name? She asked finally, more to fill the silence than because she expected an answer. Does it matter? It matters to me. The man paused, considering this. Ethan. Ethan what? Just Ethan. He returned his attention to the jack. You should step back. If this slips, you don't want to be close. Victoria didn't step back. She'd built her company by refusing to step back. What do you do, Just Ethan, when you're not breaking into construction sites at midnight? I solve problems. He locked the jack in place and moved to the next column. Mostly structural ones, sometimes other kinds. And you just happened to be passing by my building at midnight? I was in the neighborhood, Savannah's historic district, at midnight. It's a nice neighborhood. Victoria studied him more closely. He didn't look like the engineers she usually worked with. No expensive watch, no architect's affectation, no ego that needed constant feeding. He looked like someone who worked with his hands and probably preferred it that way. You realize this building is worth $20 million, she said. I realize it's worth whatever you convince people it's worth. Ethan adjusted the second column, his movements careful and exact. Steel and concrete are just steel and concrete. The value is what you build on top. That's surprisingly philosophical for a man who won't tell me his last name. Caldwell, Ethan said after a pause. Ethan Caldwell. Victoria extended her hand. Victoria Hale. Ethan glanced at her hand, then at his own, covered in grease and concrete dust. I'll shake your hand when I'm done, he said. Right now, I need both of them. 3 hours later, as the first gray light of dawn began seeping through the building's empty window frames, Ethan tightened the final bolt on the last support column. He stood slowly, rolling his shoulders, and ran one more measurement check on his tablet. Done, he said simply. Victoria, who had spent the entire night watching him work, felt something unknot in her chest. Is it safe? Safe enough. Ethan packed his tools into a weathered canvas bag. The temporary supports are properly seated now, but you've got bigger problems than installation. Such as? Someone wanted this to fail. Ethan pulled up a series of photos on his tablet, close-ups of bolt holes that had been deliberately drilled off-center, base plates that had been filed down to create instability. This wasn't negligence, this was sabotage. Victoria's blood went cold. Who would... Someone who benefits from your failure, Ethan said. He handed her the tablet. Or someone who's being paid to make sure you fail. Either way, you should probably figure out which before they try again. He shouldered his bag and walked toward the stairs. Wait, Victoria called after him. I need to pay you. I need your information for the insurance paperwork. You don't need my name on paperwork, Ethan said over his shoulder. You needed the building to stand. It's standing. At least let me... But he was already descending the stairs, moving with the quiet efficiency of someone who had no interest in gratitude or recognition. Victoria hurried after him, but by the time she reached the ground floor, Ethan Caldwell had vanished into the gray morning light like he'd never been there at all. Marcus stood by the entrance, looking confused. Did he just leave? Victoria stared at the empty street beyond the construction fence. A decade-old Ford truck pulled away from the curb 2 blocks down, its tailgate secured with bungee cords. Yes, she said quietly. He just left. She looked down at the tablet still in her hands. Ethan's tablet, she realized with a start. He'd left it behind, either by accident or on purpose. The screen still showed the photos of sabotaged installation points, each one carefully documented and labeled. Victoria pulled out her phone and called her head of security. Robert, she said when he answered, I need you to find someone for me. Ethan Caldwell, structural engineer, probably independent. I need an address, a phone number, and every piece of information you can find by 9 a.m. What happened? Victoria looked up at her building. Standing, stable, saved by a man who wouldn't even accept thanks. Someone saved my company, she said, and then disappeared before I could figure out why. By 8:30 a.m., Victoria had showered, changed, and transformed back into the polished executive her investors expected to see. The emergency from the night before might as well have been a dream, except for the faint scent of concrete dust still clinging to her hair and the mysterious tablet sitting on her desk. Her head of security, Robert Chen, knocked and entered without waiting for permission, a privilege he'd earned after 15 years of keeping Victoria alive and successful. Ethan Caldwell, Robert said, dropping a thin file folder on her desk. 43 years old, licensed structural engineer, graduated top of his class from Georgia Tech. Worked for Morrison Engineering for 8 years before going independent 5 years ago. Victoria opened the folder. The photo showed Ethan looking slightly younger, but with the same serious expression. Independent meaning what? Meaning he operates as a sole proprietor, Caldwell Structural Solutions. Takes small jobs, consulting work, nothing bigger than residential projects or small commercial repairs. He's licensed and insured, but he keeps a low profile. No website, no advertising, just word of mouth. That doesn't make sense, Victoria said, scanning the credentials. With qualifications like these, he should be working for a major firm, making serious money. He did, Robert said, until his wife died 6 years ago, breast cancer. After that, he restructured his entire practice, turned down the big jobs, started working alone. Victoria looked up sharply. Wife? Emma Caldwell. She was a teacher, died when their daughter was 2. Robert pulled out another sheet. Which brings us to the interesting part. Ethan Caldwell leaves every job site by 2:30 p.m. Every single day, no exceptions. Why? Because he picks up his daughter from school at 3 o'clock. Daughter? Maya Caldwell, 7 years old, student at Magnolia Elementary. By all accounts, she's the center of his universe. Every decision he makes goes through one filter. Is he home in time for his daughter? Victoria sat back in her chair, processing. The man who'd saved her building at midnight, who'd worked until dawn without asking for payment, left every job by 2:30 p.m. for his daughter. Where does he live? Small house in the Parkside neighborhood. Bought it 8 years ago. Modest mortgage, paid on time. Drives a 2014 Ford F-150. No debt beyond the house, no criminal record, no drama. Robert paused. He's exactly what he appears to be, a good man who's chosen a quiet life. Nobody's that simple, Victoria said. He might be. Robert gestured to the file. I've got his address and phone number in there. What do you want to do? Victoria closed the folder and stood. I want to hire him. For what? You already have a structural engineering firm on retainer. I want to hire him for the waterfront project, full-time consultation. Victoria picked up Ethan's forgotten tablet. Someone sabotaged my building, Robert. Someone with access to my contractors, my schedules, my site. I need someone I can trust. Someone who doesn't already have their fingerprints all over this mess. You met him 6 hours ago. He saved a $20 million building in the middle of the night and refused payment, Victoria said. That's a better character reference than most people can offer after 6 years. Robert sighed. You want me to set up a meeting? No, Victoria said, already reaching for her jacket. I'll handle this one personally. The house was exactly what Victoria expected. Small, tidy, with a yard that showed signs of careful maintenance and a tire swing hanging from an old oak tree. The Ford truck sat in the driveway, still dusty from the night's work. Victoria knocked on the door at 9:15 a.m., flanked by Marcus because Robert had insisted, and Marcus because he never listened when she told him to wait in the car. The door opened. Ethan Caldwell stood in the doorway wearing clean jeans and a button-down shirt, holding a coffee mug that said "World's Okayest Dad" in faded letters. He looked at Victoria, then at Marcus, then back at Victoria. "You found me," he said. Not a question. "You left your tablet." "I know." Ethan accepted the device she held out. "I figured you'd need the photos." "You left it on purpose." "Yes." Victoria felt a flash of irritation. "You couldn't have just given them to me? Sent an email like a normal person?" "You weren't asking the right questions yet," Ethan said calmly. "Now you are." "What questions?" "Who sabotaged your building? Why they did it? How deep the corruption goes?" Ethan took a sip of coffee. "And whether you're ready to actually do something about it." Victoria straightened. "I'm always ready to do something." "Are you?" Ethan leaned against the doorframe. "Because fixing what happened last night was easy. Finding out why it happened, that's going to be complicated, expensive, probably dangerous. People who sabotage buildings don't stop just because one attempt failed. Which is why I'm here." Victoria met his eyes directly. "I want to hire you, full-time structural consultation for the waterfront project. Name your price." "No." Victoria blinked. "Excuse me?" "I said no." Ethan's expression didn't change. "I appreciate the offer, but I don't take projects that large. I work alone, I work small, and I'm home by 2:30 every day. Your project doesn't fit that model. I'll pay triple your normal rate. Money's not the issue." "Then what is?" "Time," Ethan said simply. "My daughter gets out of school at 3 p.m. I pick her up every day, no exceptions. That's non-negotiable." Victoria felt her frustration rising. "I'm not asking you to abandon your daughter. I'm asking you to help me figure out who's trying to destroy my company. 3 hours of consultation a day. Morning work. You could be done by noon. 3 hours becomes 4. 4 becomes 6. Big projects don't care about your schedule. They eat whatever time you give them and demand more." Ethan shook his head. "I learned that lesson the hard way. I'm not learning it again." "Someone is sabotaging my building," Victoria said, dropping the polite corporate tone. "Someone with enough access and knowledge to make it look like accidents. If they try again, people could die. Construction workers, inspectors, anyone who happens to be in the wrong place when a 40-ton beam decides to fall." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Then hire a firm with the resources to investigate properly. Hire 3 firms. I'm not the only engineer in Savannah." "You're the only one who saw what I couldn't," Victoria said. "The only one who showed up when no one else would. The only one I'm certain isn't part of whatever conspiracy this is. That's not enough reason to disrupt my daughter's life." "Then what is?" The question hung in the air between them. Behind Ethan, Victoria heard the sound of small feet on stairs, and then a voice, bright, cheerful, and completely unaware of the tension at the door. "Daddy, is someone here?" Ethan turned slightly. "Just a visitor, sweetheart. I'll be right there." A little girl appeared beside him, 7 years old, wearing pajamas covered in stars, dark hair and a messy braid. She looked up at Victoria with curious brown eyes. "Are you here about the building?" Maya asked. Victoria blinked. "How did you—" "Daddy came home really late last night," Maya said matter-of-factly. "He only comes home late when buildings are broken. Did you break your building?" "Maya," Ethan said gently. "That's not polite." "But it's true." Maya looked up at her father. "You said honesty is better than politeness." Victoria found herself smiling despite the frustration. "Your daughter has good instincts." "She gets that from her mother," Ethan said quietly. Maya tugged on Ethan's sleeve. "Is the building fixed now?" "Yes." "Then why is the lady here?" Good question, Victoria thought. Why was she here? She could hire a different firm. She could increase security, replace contractors, throw money at the problem until it went away. That's what executives did. That's what her board of directors would expect. But standing on this doorstep, Looking at a man who'd saved her building for no reason other than it needed saving, Victoria realized she didn't want the safe choice. She wanted the right one. "I'm here," Victoria said, speaking to Maya but watching Ethan, "because your dad is really good at fixing things, and I need someone really good." Maya considered this. "He is really good. He fixed my bike, and he fixed Mrs. Patterson's porch, and he fixed Mr. Chen's steps when they were wobbly." "That's impressive." "But he's always home by 2:30, Maya added firmly. "Always, always. Even when Mr. Patterson wanted him to stay late, Daddy said no." "Always, always," Victoria repeated. "I understand." She looked at Ethan. He was watching her with that same calm, measuring expression, waiting to see what she'd do next. Victoria made a decision. "Mornings only," she said. 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. You consult, you investigate, you help me figure out who's sabotaging my project, but you're done by 2, no exceptions, no emergency calls, no late-night crises. You pick up Maya at 3, just like always." Ethan hesitated. "That's an 8-hour window. Most people would want—" "I'm not most people," Victoria interrupted, "and you're not most engineers, so here's what I'm offering. 8 hours a day, Monday through Friday, triple your normal consulting rate, plus a completion bonus when the project finishes clean. In exchange, I get your expertise and your honesty. No politics, no corporate games, just straight answers to hard questions. And if the answers lead somewhere you don't want to go, then we go there anyway," Victoria said. "Because I don't build my company on lies." Ethan studied her for a long moment. Maya watched them both, sensing something important was happening, even if she didn't understand exactly what. Finally, Ethan nodded. 2 weeks, he said. "Trial period. If it interferes with my time with Maya, I walk. If you try to push me past 2 p.m., I walk. If you lie to me or hide information, I walk. Clear?" "Crystal clear." "Then I'll see you tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. at the site." Victoria extended her hand. This time, Ethan shook it. His grip was exactly what she expected, strong, calloused, and honest. "Tomorrow," Victoria agreed. She nodded to Maya. "It was nice meeting you." "Bye," Maya waved. Victoria walked back to her car, Marcus falling into step beside her. "That went better than expected," Marcus observed. "Did it?" Victoria climbed into the back seat. "I just hired a man who refuses to work past 2 p.m. to investigate a multi-million-dollar conspiracy. My board of directors will think I've lost my mind." "Have you?" Victoria thought about Ethan Caldwell, the way he'd worked through the night without asking questions, the way he'd left without asking for payment, the way he'd turned down triple his rate until she agreed to respect his daughter's schedule. "No," she said finally. "I think I might have just made the smartest hire of my career." The car pulled away from the curb. Through the window, Victoria saw Ethan close his front door, returning to the quiet life he'd built for himself and his daughter. A quiet life she was about to disrupt. But as Robert had said, sometimes the right choice wasn't the easy one. And Victoria Hale had never been interested in easy. The waterfront development site looked different in daylight. What had seemed like a skeletal monument to ambition in the darkness now revealed itself as a sprawling construction zone stretching 3 city blocks along the Savannah River. Cranes stood like sentinels against the morning sky, and the sound of distant hammering echoed off the water. Victoria arrived at 5:45 a.m., 15 minutes early, because arriving exactly on time felt like giving up control. Her project manager, Derek Holloway, was already waiting by the construction office trailer, looking anxious. "We need to talk about yesterday," Derek said before she'd even closed her car door. "The investors are asking questions about the delay. They want to know why we called an emergency inspection at midnight." "Because the building was about to collapse," Victoria said flatly. "Was I supposed to wait until morning and hope physics would be patient?" "That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying we need a better story. Something that doesn't make us look incompetent." "The truth isn't about looking competent, Derek. It's about being honest." Derek shifted uncomfortably. "Speaking of honesty, who exactly fixed the supports?" "The night crew says nobody was authorized to be on site after 10 p.m. "I authorized it." "You're not a licensed contractor. You can't just—" "I can do whatever is necessary to protect my company," Victoria interrupted. And right now, what's necessary is figuring out who's sabotaging this project before they try again. Derek's expression shifted from anxious to confused. Sabotage? Victoria, I think you're overreacting. Sometimes installations fail. It's construction. Things happen. Things don't happen, a voice said from behind them. People make them happen. Victoria turned to see Ethan Caldwell walking toward them, carrying the same weathered canvas bag from the night before and holding a large coffee in a thermos. He moved with the unhurried confidence of someone who knew exactly what he was doing and didn't need to prove it. Ethan Caldwell, Victoria said. This is Derek Holloway, my project manager. Derek, this is the structural engineer I've hired to consult on the waterfront development. Derek's eyes narrowed. I thought Morrison Engineering was handling structural oversight. They were, Ethan said calmly. How's that working out for you? The implied criticism hung in the air. Derek's face reddened slightly. Morrison is a respected firm with 30 years of paperwork that says everything is fine, Ethan interrupted. He pulled out his tablet and brought up the photos from the night before. Except these bolt holes were drilled off center by exactly 12 millimeters. The base plates were filed down to create instability, and the installation logs were falsified to hide it. Derek stared at the images. That's impossible. I personally reviewed... You reviewed documents, Ethan said. I reviewed the actual structure. There's a difference. Victoria watched Derek's face carefully. He looked genuinely shocked, which either meant he was innocent or an excellent actor. In her experience, project managers were rarely good enough actors to fake that kind of surprise. If what you're saying is true, Derek said slowly, then we have a serious problem. Those supports were installed by Briggs Construction. They're one of our primary contractors. Briggs Construction, Ethan repeated, making a note on his tablet. Who hired them? They were part of the original bid package, lowest qualified bidder for structural installation. Derek pulled out his phone, scrolling through contacts. Dalton Briggs owns the company. He's been in business for 15 years, never had a major safety violation. Until now, Victoria said. Ethan was already walking toward the building, studying the 4th floor through the early morning light. I need access to all installation records for the past 6 months. Material invoices, work orders, inspection reports, everything. That's going to take time to compile, Derek said. Then start compiling. Ethan didn't look back. I'll be inside checking the rest of the supports. If someone sabotaged one floor, they probably sabotaged others. Victoria followed him toward the entrance. Behind her, she heard Derek making urgent phone calls, his voice tight with stress. Inside the building, Ethan moved through the space like a detective at a crime scene. He checked measurements, took photos, ran his hands along welds and joints. Victoria watched him work, fascinated by the methodical precision. What exactly are you looking for? She asked. Patterns, Ethan said without looking up from a support beam. Sabotage is rarely random. People make mistakes. They leave signatures. He pointed to a weld that looked perfectly fine to Victoria's untrained eye. See this? The bead is smooth, consistent. That's good work. But look here. He moved to another beam 10 feet away. This weld looked nearly identical. I don't see the difference, Victoria admitted. That's because there isn't one. Same welder, same technique, same quality. Which means whoever sabotaged the 4th floor didn't sabotage these. Ethan made another note. The question is why? Why compromise one floor and leave the others alone? Maybe they didn't have time? Or maybe they had a specific target. Ethan stood, brushing dust from his hands. The 4th floor is critical. It's where the load distribution changes. If that floor fails, everything above it comes down, but the floors below might survive. Victoria felt cold despite the morning heat. You're saying they wanted to bring down part of the building, not all of it. I'm saying they understood structural engineering well enough to know where to hit for maximum damage with minimum evidence. Ethan met her eyes. This wasn't random vandalism. This was calculated. They spent the next 3 hours going through every floor, every support, every critical junction. Ethan worked in focused silence, occasionally dictating observations into his tablet. Victoria found herself mesmerized by the way he saw the building, not as a collection of materials, but as a living system where every piece affected every other piece. By 9:30, they'd covered the entire structure. Ethan sat on a stack of lumber in the ground floor, reviewing his notes while Victoria leaned against a temporary wall, exhausted despite having done none of the actual work. "Well?" she asked finally. "Fourth floor was the only major compromise," Ethan said, "but there are smaller issues throughout. Missing bolts here, under-torqued connections there. Nothing critical by itself, but collectively it weakens the structure. Like someone was building in failure points. For what purpose? Insurance fraud, maybe. Or to delay construction long enough that you miss your completion deadlines and lose your investors." Ethan closed his tablet. "Or to create enough problems that you're forced to sell the project at a loss." Victoria's mind raced through possibilities. The waterfront development had attracted attention from the moment she'd announced it. Prime real estate, massive profit potential, and more than a few competitors who'd wanted the land for themselves. "I need to see Dalton Briggs," she said. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You're going to confront him directly?" "I'm going to ask him questions. Directly." "That's a terrible idea." "Why?" "Because if he's behind this, confronting him tips your hand. He'll know you're investigating. He'll cover his tracks, threaten his crew into silence, or disappear the evidence." Ethan stood, shouldering his bag. "You need to be smarter than that." Victoria bristled. "I didn't build a multi-million-dollar company by being passive." "No, but you might lose it by being reckless." Ethan's tone was matter-of-fact, not argumentative. "Right now, Briggs thinks he got away with it. The supports are fixed, the building is standing, and from his perspective it just looks like a close call. That gives us an advantage." "What kind of advantage?" "The kind where he keeps making mistakes because he thinks nobody's watching." Ethan checked his watch. "It's 9:45. I need to review the installation records Derek is compiling. That'll take me until around 1 o'clock, which gives me an hour to write up preliminary findings before I leave at 2. And what am I supposed to do in the meantime?" "Whatever you normally do," Ethan said. "Run your company. Meet with investors. Act like everything is fine. Because the moment you start acting suspicious, everyone involved in this starts covering their tracks." Victoria hated the advice because it made sense. She'd built her reputation on being aggressive, on attacking problems head-on. But Ethan was right. Sometimes the best attack was patience. "Fine," she said, "but I want daily updates. Everything you find, I need to know." "Agreed." Ethan headed toward the exit, then paused. "One more thing. Do you have security footage of the construction site?" "Of course, 24-hour monitoring. I need to see the footage from the week before the fourth floor installation. Specifically, I need to know who had access to the site after hours." Victoria pulled out her phone. "I'll have Robert send you the files." "Good." Ethan nodded once and walked out into the bright morning sun. Victoria stood alone in the empty building, surrounded by steel and concrete and the echo of her own thoughts. Somewhere in this structure was evidence of who wanted to destroy her, and for the first time in her career, she was trusting someone else to find it. The investor meeting at noon was exactly as tedious as Victoria had anticipated. 6 men in expensive suits asking careful questions about timelines, budgets, and return on investment. She answered with the practiced ease of someone who'd given the same presentation 100 times, never once mentioning midnight structural failures or sabotage. But her mind kept drifting to Ethan, somewhere in the construction office, methodically working through installation records and security footage. What was he finding? What patterns was he seeing that everyone else had missed? Victoria? One of the investors, Thomas Kiernan, a real estate developer from Atlanta, was looking at her expectantly. The question was about your contingency planning for weather delays. "We've built in a 4-week buffer for weather and unforeseen complications," Victoria said smoothly, pulling her attention back. "Based on historical rainfall data and seasonal patterns, we're confident in the current timeline." "What about labor shortages? We've heard rumors that some of your contractors are having trouble retaining skilled workers." Victoria's internal radar pinged. Rumors from where? She kept her expression neutral. "All our primary contractors maintain full crews. If you've heard otherwise, I'd be interested to know the source." Kiernan smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Just industry talk. You know how it is." "I don't actually," Victoria said. "In my experience, industry talk usually has a specific source, someone who benefits from spreading doubt." The room went quiet. Kiernan's smile faded slightly. Are you suggesting someone is deliberately trying to undermine your project? Another investor asked. I'm suggesting that successful projects attract attention, Victoria said carefully. Not all of it positive, but I didn't build Hale Development by backing down from competition or getting distracted by rumors. The waterfront project is on schedule, on budget, and built to the highest standards. That's what matters. The meeting continued, but Victoria noticed something shift. Kiernan watched her more carefully now, his questions slightly sharper, his tone slightly cooler. She made a mental note to have Robert investigate his connections to other developers in the area. By the time the investors left at 1:30, Victoria felt exhausted. She returned to the construction site to find Ethan exactly where she'd left him, in the trailer office, surrounded by file boxes and printouts, his laptop open to multiple screens of data. Please tell me you found something, she said. Ethan looked up, his expression unreadable. I found a lot of things. Whether they're useful is another question. He turned his laptop so she could see. The screen showed a spreadsheet with hundreds of entries, dates, materials, installation crews, inspection reports. This is every structural installation for the past 6 months, Ethan said. I cross-referenced it with the security footage, material delivery logs, and inspection schedules. There's a pattern. Victoria leaned closer. What kind of pattern? Every installation that later showed problems, the 4th floor supports, the missing bolts on the 7th floor, the under-torqued connections on the 10th, all of them happened during shifts when the same 3-person crew was on site. Ethan highlighted names on the screen. Tom Dawson, Mike Rivera, and James Chen, all employed by Briggs Construction, all with spotless safety records, and all of them consistently working late shifts when fewer people were around to notice what they were doing. Could be coincidence. Could be, Ethan agreed, except I checked their work histories. Before this project, all 3 worked for different companies. They've only been working together since Briggs got the contract for your development. And look at this. He pulled up another document, payroll records. These 3 get paid significantly more than other workers with similar experience. 20% higher base rate, plus overtime that doesn't quite match the hours logged on site. Victoria felt her pulse quicken. They're being paid extra to sabotage the building. Or they're being paid extra for something, and sabotage is the most logical explanation. Ethan closed the laptop. But we need proof. Right now, this is just correlation. A good lawyer would tear it apart. Then we get proof. How? Victoria thought fast. We set a trap. We announce a critical installation for next week. Something important enough that if they sabotage it, the pattern becomes undeniable. We flood the area with cameras, inspectors, documentation. We catch them in the act. Ethan was already shaking his head. Too risky. If they're smart enough to have gotten this far, they're smart enough to smell a trap. And if you're wrong, you've just wasted time and resources on a theatrical production. Then what do you suggest? Ethan checked his watch. It was 1:50. 10 minutes until he had to leave. I suggest we keep watching, keep documenting, build an airtight case before we make any moves. He started packing his laptop and papers. This isn't a sprint, it's a marathon. I don't do marathons, Victoria said. I solve problems quickly and move on. Then you're going to have to learn patience, Ethan said, not unkindly. Because whoever is behind this has been patient enough to plan carefully and execute slowly. You're not going to beat them by being impulsive. He was right, and Victoria hated that he was right. Ethan stood, bag packed, ready to leave. I'll review the footage over the weekend, see if I can find anything else. But right now, I need to go pick up my daughter. It's only 1:55, which gives me time to stop at the bakery and pick up cookies, Ethan said. Maya likes the chocolate chip ones. It's our Friday tradition. Victoria watched him head toward the door. This man who could dismantle a corporate conspiracy and still prioritize chocolate chip cookies. There was something both admirable and frustrating about it. Ethan, she called after him, thank you for taking this seriously. He paused at the doorway. I take everything seriously, especially things that could get people killed. Then he was gone, leaving Victoria alone with boxes of evidence and a growing sense that she'd only scratched the surface of something much deeper. That evening, Victoria sat in her downtown office reviewing security footage on her laptop. Robert had sent her the files Ethan requested, along with some additional material he thought might be relevant. She watched hours of grainy black and white footage, looking for anything unusual. At 11:47 p.m., she found it. The timestamp showed 3 weeks ago, 2 days before the fourth floor installation began. A black SUV pulled up to the construction site gate. A man got out, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a suit that looked expensive even in the low-quality footage. He spoke briefly to the night security guard, showed some kind of credentials, and was waved through. Victoria paused the footage and zoomed in on the man's face. Dalton Briggs. She recognized him from industry events, the kind of contractor who always seemed to be at the center of the biggest projects, the most profitable deals. He had a reputation for being ruthless but effective. Victoria watched as Briggs walked through the site, stopping at various points to take photos with his phone. He spent 15 minutes on the fourth floor, examining the areas where supports would later be installed. He wasn't checking on his crew's work. He was planning where to sabotage it. Victoria's phone rang. Robert. "Tell me you're seeing what I'm seeing," Robert said without preamble. "Briggs on site after hours 3 weeks ago." Not just after hours. After hours without logging it with the main office. I checked the visitor records. His name doesn't appear anywhere. Robert's voice was tight with controlled anger. He used his contractor credentials to get past security, but he never filed the required access report, which means he didn't want anyone to know he was there. Exactly. And there's more. Robert sent her another file. I did a deep dive on Briggs Construction's finances. The company is leveraged to the limit. They're carrying massive debt from 3 projects that went over budget last year. They need cash and they need it fast. Victoria opened the file, scanning the numbers. Briggs Construction was hemorrhaging money, barely staying afloat through aggressive payment negotiations and delayed vendor payments. So he's desperate, Victoria said. Desperate enough to accept money from someone who wants your project to fail, Robert agreed. The question is, who's paying him? Victoria thought about the investor meeting earlier that day. Thomas Kiernan's careful questions, his knowing smile, his interest in rumors about labor shortages. I think I might know, she said slowly, but I need to be sure. What do you need from me? Everything you can find on Kiernan Development Group, financial records, current projects, connections to other contractors in the region. I want to know if Kiernan has any history with Briggs. I'll have it by Monday morning. Victoria ended the call and sat back in her chair, staring at the frozen image of Dalton Briggs on her screen. The pieces were starting to fit together. A desperate contractor, a rival developer, a carefully planned campaign to undermine her project from the inside. But knowing the shape of the conspiracy wasn't the same as proving it. And Ethan was right. Confronting them directly would only drive them underground. She needed to be smarter, more patient. She needed to think like an engineer, not an executive. Build the case one piece at a time. Document everything. Create a structure of evidence so solid that it couldn't be torn down. Victoria pulled out her phone and sent a text to Ethan. Found something on the security footage. Briggs was on site after hours 3 weeks ago, didn't log the visit. Possible financial motive confirmed. Need to discuss strategy Monday morning. The reply came back almost immediately. Good work, but not Monday. Maya has a field trip to the aquarium. I'm chaperoning. Tuesday at 6 a.m. Victoria stared at the message, torn between frustration and something that might have been respect. The man was investigating a multi-million-dollar conspiracy, and he still prioritized aquarium field trips. She typed back, Tuesday works. Enjoy the aquarium. Thanks. Maya's excited about the sea turtles. Victoria smiled despite herself. Somewhere in Savannah, a 7-year-old girl was excited about sea turtles, completely unaware that her father was helping to unravel a corporate conspiracy. There was something pure about that, something worth protecting. She returned her attention to the security footage, watching Dalton Briggs move through her construction site like he owned it, planning his sabotage, counting his payoff. He thought he'd gotten away with it, but he'd left traces, patterns, signatures. And Victoria Hale didn't lose. Not her company, not her project, and definitely not to people who thought they could hide behind falsified inspection reports and midnight visits. The weekend passed in a blur of research and documentation. Victoria spent Saturday reviewing every contract, every payment record, every communication with Briggs Construction. She found small inconsistencies, invoices that didn't quite match material deliveries, time logs that showed crews on site during hours when security footage showed the site empty. Individually, they were minor discrepancies. Collectively, They painted a picture of systematic fraud. Sunday evening, Robert called with his findings on Thomas Kiernan. "You were right to be suspicious," Robert said. "Kiernan Development Group tried to buy the waterfront property 2 years ago, before you made your offer. They were willing to go 20% above asking price, but the city council rejected their proposal." Why? Officially, their development plan didn't align with the city's vision for revitalizing the waterfront. Unofficially, Kiernan has a reputation for cutting corners and bribing inspectors. The council didn't want to risk it. Victoria felt the pieces clicking together. So he lost the property to me, watched me get approval for a project he wanted, and decided to make sure I'd fail. More than that, I found financial transfers between Kiernan Development Group and a shell company registered in Delaware. That same shell company has been making payments to Briggs Construction over the past 6 months. Large payments, well above market rate for the work being performed. How large? $500,000. Victoria let out a slow breath. $500,000 was enough motive to sabotage a building. It was enough motive to risk people's lives. "Can we trace the payments definitively back to Kiernan?" she asked. "With subpoena power, yes. Without it, probably not. He's been careful to use layers of shell companies and offshore accounts. This is sophisticated financial engineering. Then we need to give law enforcement a reason to subpoena those records, which means we need ironclad evidence of the sabotage itself," Robert said. "Something that proves beyond doubt that Briggs intentionally compromised the building." Victoria thought about the photos on Ethan's tablet, the drilled-out bolt holes, the filed-down base plates, the meticulous documentation of deliberate structural weaknesses. "I think I know someone who can provide that," she said. Tuesday morning arrived with clouds heavy enough to threaten rain. Victoria reached the construction site at 5:50 a.m., earlier than usual, driven by restless energy and the need to move forward. Ethan was already there, standing in the trailer office doorway with his thermos of coffee, watching the gray sky. "Looks like rain," he said by way of greeting. "How was the aquarium?" Victoria asked. "Educational. Maya learned that sea turtles can hold their breath for 7 hours. Ethan took a sip of coffee. "She's decided she wants to be a marine biologist now. Last month it was astronaut. Next month it'll probably be something else." "That must be exciting, watching her interests change." "It's terrifying," Ethan said honestly. "Every interest is a possible future. Every future is a path I might not be able to help her navigate." He shook his head. "But that's parenthood. You do your best and hope it's enough." Victoria thought about her own childhood. Boarding schools and nannies, a father too busy building an empire to watch interests change. She'd sworn her life would be different. Instead, she'd built her own empire and filled it with everything except the time to watch someone grow. "I found evidence connecting Kiernan to Briggs," she said, redirecting to safer territory. "Financial transfers through shell companies. $500,000 over 6 months. Ethan's expression sharpened. "That's substantial. Can you prove it?" "With a subpoena, yes. Without one, maybe." Robert is working the financial angle. Victoria pulled out her tablet, showing him the security footage of Briggs on site after hours. "Combined with this and the structural evidence you've documented, I think we have enough to go to the police." Ethan watched the footage carefully, his engineer's mind processing details. Going to the police means going public. Once you file a report, this becomes news. Your investors will panic, your contractors will lawyer up, your project timeline will explode. "I know. Are you prepared for that?" Victoria met his eyes. "I'm prepared to do what's right, even if it costs me." Ethan studied her for a long moment, as if measuring something beyond words. Finally, he nodded. "Then let's build a case they can't ignore." They spent the next week building evidence with the precision of archaeologists excavating a crime scene. Every morning at 6, Ethan arrived with his thermos and his meticulous mind, ready to dig deeper into the structure's secrets. Every afternoon at 2, he left without apology, returning to the life he'd built around his daughter. Victoria learned to work within those boundaries. She discovered that 8 focused hours with someone who knew exactly what they were looking for was worth more than 16 scattered hours with people who were guessing. On Wednesday, Ethan brought in portable X-ray equipment to examine welds without cutting them open. The images revealed what the eye couldn't see: deliberate gaps in the metal, weak points engineered to fail under stress. He documented each one with photographs, measurements, and detailed technical notes that read like a prosecutor's dream. "This isn't just sabotage," Ethan said, studying a particularly egregious example on the 8th floor. "This is a textbook on how to make a building fail. Someone trained these workers on exactly where to compromise the structure for maximum effect with minimum visibility." "Briggs?" Victoria asked. "Maybe. Or someone he hired who knows more about structural engineering than your average contractor." Ethan made another note on his tablet. "These aren't random mistakes. They're calculated insertions of failure into a system designed to stand. It takes knowledge to do that." Victoria felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning temperature. "You're saying we might be dealing with an engineer?" "I'm saying we're dealing with someone who understands load distribution, stress analysis, and progressive collapse theory. Whether they have a degree or learned it some other way, they know their stuff." The implications settled over Victoria like fog. An engineer working against her, someone with credentials, knowledge, access to the same professional network she relied on. The betrayal felt personal in a way that simple corruption didn't. "Can you identify who?" she asked. Ethan was quiet for a moment, thinking. "Maybe. If I compare the sabotage pattern to known failure methodologies, I might be able to narrow down where this person was trained. Different engineering programs teach slightly different approaches to structural analysis. Those differences leave fingerprints." "Do it," Victoria said. "Whatever you need." By Friday, Ethan had compiled a 70-page technical report documenting every compromised element in the building. The document read like an indictment, cold, factual, and devastating. He'd included comparison photographs showing proper installation versus sabotaged installation, laboratory analysis of weakened welds, and calculations proving that the compromises were intentional rather than accidental. "This is bulletproof," Victoria said, reading through the report in the trailer office. "A first-year law student could prosecute this case." "The engineering is bulletproof," Ethan corrected. "The legal side is your department. I just tell you what happened to the building. You figure out what to do about the people who did it." Victoria looked up from the report. "I'm going to the police." "This afternoon." Ethan's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "You sure about the timing?" "The longer we wait, the more time Briggs and Kiernan have to cover their tracks." Victoria closed the report. "Robert has the financial evidence ready. You have the structural evidence. We have security footage, material records, and witness testimony from workers who've noticed discrepancies. We have everything we need." "Except the endgame," Ethan said quietly. "What do you mean?" "I mean, we know Briggs sabotaged your building. We know Kiernan probably paid him to do it. But we don't know why." Ethan leaned back against the desk, arms crossed. "Kiernan's a developer. He wanted this property. But sabotaging your building doesn't get him the property back. It just delays your project and damages your reputation. What's his actual goal?" Victoria hadn't thought about it in those terms. She'd been so focused on gathering evidence that she hadn't stepped back to ask the larger question. "Maybe he wants to buy the project from me at a loss," she said slowly. "If the building has a reputation for structural problems, if investors pull out, I might be forced to sell." "Would you?" The question was direct, almost challenging. Victoria met Ethan's eyes. "No," she said firmly. "I don't quit." "Then he knows that too. Which means forcing you to sell isn't his primary strategy." Ethan pulled up something on his tablet, a news article from 6 months ago. "Look at this. Kiernan Development Group just secured a major contract to build a convention center in Charleston. $300 million. The city council specifically chose him over 2 other bidders. So, how does a developer with a reputation for cutting corners and bribing inspectors win a $300 million contract?" Ethan scrolled through more articles. "Unless his reputation isn't as bad as Robert suggested, unless he's been working very hard to rebuild his image. And what better way to look legitimate than to point at a competitor's spectacular failure and say, 'See, we would never let that happen'?" Victoria felt understanding crystallize. "He's not trying to steal my project. He's trying to use my failure as proof of his competence." Which means once your building collapses, or even just develops enough problems to make headlines, he doesn't need to buy it from you. He just needs to make sure every city council in the region knows that Victoria Hale's flagship development was a structural disaster while his projects stand firm. That son of a... Victoria cut herself off, fury rising hot in her chest. Ethan remained calm, watching her process. Going to the police stops the sabotage, but it might play right into Kiernan's hands. Hale Development Corporation embroiled in criminal investigation, structural failures throughout flagship project. That's the headline. That's what city councils remember when they're choosing between bidders. Victoria stood abruptly, pacing the small trailer office. Everything Ethan said made terrible sense. Kiernan didn't need her to fail completely. He just needed her to be damaged enough that his own reputation looked sterling by comparison. Then what do we do? She asked. Let him get away with it? No, Ethan said. We get smarter than him. He pulled up a calendar on his tablet, marking dates. In 3 weeks, the city council votes on final permits for your waterfront development. If you have permits, you can proceed to completion regardless of any investigation. The building will stand, you'll finish on time, and Kiernan loses his narrative. But we still have a sabotaged building. Which I've been fixing as we go, Ethan said. Every compromised element I've found, I've documented and either repaired or flagged for replacement. The building is structurally sound right now. It'll pass inspection. Victoria stopped pacing. You've been fixing it? When? Evenings, after I put Maya to bed. Ethan shrugged like it was nothing. Takes me about 2 hours most nights. I bring in a crew of people I trust, we make the repairs, I document everything. Your building is safer now than it was when you broke ground. Something warm and unexpected moved through Victoria's chest. This man had been working 16-hour days, 8 with her, 2 more after his daughter slept, to protect a project that wasn't even his, all while maintaining the fiction that he left at 2 and never looked back. Why didn't you tell me? She asked quietly. Because you would have insisted on paying me extra, or you would have felt guilty about my time, or you would have tried to help, which would have defeated the purpose of keeping your evenings free for investor management. Ethan met her eyes. I don't do this for recognition, Victoria. I do it because buildings matter. People work in them, live in them, trust them to stand. When someone compromises that trust, I take it personally. Victoria didn't know what to say. In her world, people did things for recognition, for money, for advancement. The idea of someone working in silence simply because it was right felt almost foreign. Thank you, she said finally. Ethan nodded once, accepting. So here's what I propose. We hold the police report until after the permit vote. We make sure the building passes inspection with flying colors. We get your permits locked in. Then we go public with everything. The sabotage, the evidence, the whole conspiracy. At that point, your project is legally protected and Kiernan's reputation takes the hit instead of yours. 3 weeks, Victoria said. Can we keep this quiet for 3 weeks? If Briggs and his crew think they got away with it, yes. They've already stopped the obvious sabotage since we started investigating. They're being careful. As long as we don't spook them, they'll stay quiet. And if they try again? They won't, Ethan said with confidence. I've been watching. They know someone's paying attention now. They're not stupid enough to try anything this close to the permit vote. Victoria considered the strategy. It was risky. It required patience she wasn't sure she had. But it was smart, and it protected both the project and her company's reputation. All right, she said. We wait 3 weeks. But the moment those permits are signed, we bury them, Ethan finished. Police, press, prosecutors, everything at once. Everything at once, Victoria agreed. The next 2 weeks tested Victoria's patience like nothing else in her career. Every morning she walked into the construction site knowing it had been sabotaged, knowing who was responsible, knowing she had evidence that could end them. And every morning she smiled at contractors, reviewed schedules, and acted like everything was perfectly normal. Ethan continued his methodical work, documenting and repairing, building an evidentiary foundation that grew stronger by the day. He started bringing Maya to the site on Saturday mornings, carefully supervised visits where she wore an oversized hard hat and asked endless questions about how buildings stood up. If you push on this side, Maya asked, pressing her small hand against a support beam, why doesn't it fall over? Because the foundation holds it, Ethan explained patiently. Everything connects to everything else. When you push here, the force travels down through the beam, into the floor, through the supports, all the way to the ground. The earth pushes back with equal force. That's how it stays standing. What if the foundation is bad? Then everything falls, Ethan said simply. That's why the foundation is the most important part. It has to be solid, or nothing else matters. Victoria, watching from a distance, thought about foundations in broader terms. Her company's foundation, her life's foundation. The things that held everything else up when pressure pushed from unexpected directions. What was her foundation? Money? Success? Reputation? Or was it something simpler, the choice to do right even when wrong was easier? On the Tuesday before the permit vote, Derek approached Victoria with unexpected news. Briggs Construction wants to renegotiate their contract, Derek said, looking puzzled. They're offering a significant discount, 20% reduction in remaining fees, if we'll agree to extend their work through the interior finishing phase. Victoria felt alarm bells ringing. Why would they offer a discount? They claim it's about efficiency. If they're already familiar with the building, they can complete interior work faster and cheaper than bringing in a new contractor. Or they want to maintain access so they can cause more problems, Victoria said. Derek frowned. You really think they're deliberately sabotaging us? I know you hired Caldwell to investigate, but we haven't found any concrete evidence of intentional... We have 70 pages of concrete evidence, Victoria interrupted. We're just waiting for the right moment to use it. Derek's eyes widened. 70 pages? Why haven't you... Because timing matters, Victoria said. And right now, our timing is perfect. Tell Briggs we'll consider their offer after the permit vote. String them along. Let them think we're interested. You want to keep them close. I want them comfortable. Comfortable people make mistakes. Derek nodded slowly, understanding dawning. You're setting them up. I'm making sure when they fall hard. The day of the permit vote arrived with deceptive calm. Victoria wore her best suit, deep blue, perfectly tailored, radiating confidence and control. She'd prepared a presentation for the city council that highlighted every positive aspect of the waterfront development while carefully avoiding any mention of the structural issues that had nearly destroyed it. Ethan met her in the parking lot outside City Hall at 7:30 in the morning. Nervous? He asked. Terrified, Victoria admitted. Everything depends on this vote. If they deny the permits, Kieran wins regardless of what evidence we have. The project stalls, investors flee, and my company's reputation takes the hit he's been engineering. They won't deny it, Ethan said with quiet certainty. Your building is sound. The inspection reports are flawless. You've met every requirement and exceeded most. The only way they could justify denial is corruption, and that's riskier for them than approval. You sound very sure. I am sure. I've reviewed the building codes, the inspection criteria, and the council's voting history. Barring intervention from someone very powerful, you'll get your permits. Victoria studied him. Have you always been this calm in crisis situations? No, Ethan said honestly. I used to be exactly like you, stressed, anxious, trying to control everything. Then Maya was born, and Emma got sick, and I learned that some things you can't control no matter how hard you try. All you can do is prepare as well as possible and accept whatever comes. That sounds exhausting. It's actually freeing, Ethan said. When you stop trying to control everything, you can focus your energy on the things that actually matter. And what matters here? The truth, Ethan said simply. We know the building is safe. We know we did everything right. That's what matters. The vote is just paperwork confirming what we already know to be true. Victoria wanted to believe that. She wanted Ethan's calm certainty to settle over her like a blanket. But she'd been in business too long to trust that truth always won over politics. The council chambers filled slowly. Developers, contractors, city officials, and a handful of citizens interested in waterfront development. Victoria spotted Thomas Kiernan sitting 3 rows back, watching her with a slight smile that made her want to throw something heavy. Dalton Briggs sat near the front, dressed in an expensive suit that probably cost more than his workers earned in a month. He looked confident, relaxed, like a man who knew the outcome before the votes were counted. Victoria took her seat at the presenter's table. Ethan sat in the public gallery, his weathered canvas bag at his feet, looking distinctly out of place among the suits and ties. The council chairman called the meeting to order at 9 a.m. sharp. First item on the agenda, Chairman Morrison announced. Final permit approval for the Hale Development Corporation waterfront project. Miss Hale, you have 15 minutes to present. Victoria stood, activated her presentation, and launched into the speech she'd practiced a dozen times. She highlighted the project's economic impact, the jobs it would create, the tax revenue it would generate. She showed architectural renderings that made the development look like a masterpiece of modern design. She presented inspection reports proving every safety requirement had been met or exceeded. She was smooth, professional, persuasive. She was also lying by omission, and she hated every second of it. When she finished, Chairman Morrison opened the floor for questions. Councilmember Patricia Hayes raised her hand immediately. Ms. Hale, we've heard rumors of structural issues during construction. Can you address those concerns? Victoria's pulse jumped, but her expression remained calm. Early in the construction process, we identified some installation irregularities with temporary support systems. We immediately brought in independent engineering consultation to assess and address the issues. I'm happy to report that all structural elements now exceed safety requirements, as confirmed by our most recent inspection. Who provided this independent consultation? Hayes pressed. Caldwell Structural Solutions. Mr. Caldwell is here today if you'd like to verify his findings directly. Hayes looked toward the gallery. Ethan raised his hand slightly, acknowledging. Mr. Caldwell, Hayes said, can you confirm that the Hale waterfront development meets all structural safety requirements? Ethan stood. Yes, council member. I've conducted comprehensive analysis of every critical structural element. The building exceeds current code requirements for load capacity, seismic resistance, and progressive collapse prevention. It's one of the safest structures I've evaluated in my career. And the irregularities Ms. Hale mentioned were identified, documented, and corrected. That's what quality control looks like. Ethan's voice was level, confident, carrying the weight of expertise. No building is perfect during construction. The question is whether problems are caught and fixed. In this case, they were. Hayes nodded, apparently satisfied. Several other council members asked routine questions about environmental impact, traffic patterns, and economic projections. Victoria answered each with practiced ease. Then Thomas Kiernan raised his hand. Mr. Chairman, Kiernan said smoothly, I'd like to raise a concern about Hale Development's insurance coverage. Chairman Morrison frowned. That's not on the agenda, Mr. Kiernan. I understand, but it's relevant to the permit decision. If Hale Development lacks adequate insurance to protect against structural failure, the city could face significant liability. Victoria felt ice in her veins. This was it. The final attack. Kiernan was trying to plant doubt at the last possible moment. Our insurance coverage is comprehensive and well documented, Victoria said firmly. We carry $50 million in general liability, $25 million in professional liability, and have performance bonds covering the full project value. I'm not questioning your coverage, Kiernan said with fake concern. I'm questioning whether your structural engineer's firm carries sufficient insurance. If Mr. Caldwell's recommendations prove faulty and the building fails, will his insurance cover the damages, or will the city be left holding the liability? It was a clever attack. Kiernan was using insurance technicalities to undermine Ethan's credibility without directly accusing him of incompetence. Mr. Caldwell's insurance coverage is, Victoria began, but Ethan cut her off. My firm carries a $50 million professional liability policy, Ethan said calmly, standing again. Underwritten by Continental Engineering Insurance, policy number CEI-447-2192. It's been verified by Ms. Hale's legal team and accepted by her insurance carriers. If Mr. Kiernan would like to verify those details, I'm happy to provide the underwriter's contact information. Kiernan's smile slipped slightly. That seems like unusually high coverage for an independent consultant. It's appropriate coverage for the work I do, Ethan said. I don't cut corners on safety, and I don't cut corners on insurance. If something I design or approve fails, I want my clients protected. That's called professional responsibility. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Council members shifted uncomfortably. Kiernan's face hardened. Chairman Morrison cleared his throat. Unless there are further relevant questions, we'll proceed to the vote. All those in favor of granting final permits to the Hale Development Corporation waterfront project? Victoria held her breath. 7 hands rose. A clear majority. Opposed? 2 hands, both from council members known to be friendly with Kiernan Development Group. Motion carries, Morrison announced. Permits are approved. Congratulations, Miss Hale. Relief flooded through Victoria so suddenly she felt dizzy. They'd done it. The project was legally protected. Nothing Kiernan or Briggs did now could stop construction from proceeding. She turned to look at Ethan. He gave her the smallest nod. Acknowledgement, satisfaction, and something that might have been pride. Kiernan stood abruptly and left the chamber without a word. Briggs followed moments later, his confident expression replaced by something tighter, more concerned. They knew something had shifted. They just didn't know how badly they'd lost yet. After the meeting, Victoria and Ethan stood outside City Hall in the bright morning sun. Around them, people dispersed to their cars and offices, but Victoria felt rooted to the spot, processing what had just happened. "We won," she said quietly. "We got the permits," Ethan corrected. "The winning comes next." Victoria pulled out her phone and called Robert. "Do it," she said when he answered. "Everything. Police, prosecutors, press. I want the evidence delivered within the hour." "Already in motion," Robert said. "I filed the criminal complaint 30 minutes ago. Detective Sarah Martinez from the Fraud Division is expecting you at noon to provide your statement. The press briefing is scheduled for 3 p.m. "That was fast." "I've been ready for 2 weeks," Robert said. "Just waiting for your word." Victoria ended the call and looked at Ethan. "Thank you. For the insurance answer in there, Kiernan tried to blindside us and you shut him down completely." "A $50 million policy isn't cheap," Ethan said. "I took it out 6 years ago when I restructured my practice. Seemed excessive at the time. Now I'm glad I did." "Why so much coverage for small projects?" Ethan was quiet for a moment. "Because Emma's medical bills taught me that catastrophe doesn't care about your plans. You prepare for the worst and hope for the best. That policy meant that even if I made a mistake, even if something I designed failed and hurt someone, Maya would be protected. She'd still have a home, still have her college fund. My failure wouldn't destroy her future." Victoria felt something crack in her chest. Everything this man did came back to his daughter. Every decision filtered through that single priority. "You're a good father," she said. "I try," Ethan said simply. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go pick up Maya from school. It's 2:15. He walked toward his truck, leaving Victoria standing outside the City Hall steps with permits in hand and a conspiracy about to explode into public view. She checked her watch. 45 minutes until she had to give her statement to the police. 3 hours until the press briefing that would destroy Kiernan and Briggs. 3 hours to prepare for the storm she was about to unleash. Victoria smiled. Let it storm. Detective Sarah Martinez had the kind of eyes that suggested she'd heard every lie worth telling and most that weren't. She sat across from Victoria in the small interview room at the Savannah Police Department, a digital recorder between them, and waited with the patience of someone who knew silence made people nervous. Victoria wasn't nervous. She was angry. Dalton Briggs accepted payment from Thomas Kiernan to deliberately sabotage my construction project, Victoria said, sliding Ethan's technical report across the table. That's 70 pages of documented structural compromises, each one carefully engineered to cause failure. My engineer identified them, repaired them, and documented everything with photographic evidence and laboratory analysis. Martinez flipped through the report, her expression unchanging. This is comprehensive. It's also damning, Victoria said. Someone with structural engineering knowledge trained Briggs's crew to install supports incorrectly, weaken welds, and create failure points throughout the building. This wasn't vandalism, it was systematic industrial sabotage. And you believe Thomas Kiernan paid for this sabotage because? Because he wanted the waterfront property I own. When he couldn't get it legally, he decided to destroy my project's reputation so thoroughly that no city council would trust Hale Development Corporation with major contracts. Meanwhile, his own reputation benefits from the comparison. Victoria pulled out her phone and showed Martinez the financial documents Robert had compiled. These are transfers from shell companies registered to Kiernan Development Group to accounts controlled by Briggs Construction. $500,000 over 6 months. Martinez studied the documents carefully. These shell companies, can you prove Kiernan controls them? With subpoena power, yes. The registration paperwork uses addresses connected to Kiernan properties. The timing of payments corresponds exactly with sabotage events documented in the construction timeline. And I have security footage showing Briggs on my construction site after hours, 3 weeks before the sabotage began, examining the exact locations that were later compromised. I'll need copies of everything, Martinez said. The technical report, the financial documents, the security footage, and I'll need to speak with your engineer. Ethan Caldwell. He's available anytime before 2 p.m. Martinez's eyebrow rose slightly. Every day before 2 p.m.
He has a daughter, Victoria said simply, as if that explained everything. And somehow, it did. Martinez made notes on a legal pad. Ms. Hale, I need to be direct with you. Corporate fraud cases are complicated. Even with strong evidence, prosecution can take years. Kiernan and Briggs will hire expensive lawyers who will argue that correlation isn't causation, that the financial transfers were for legitimate consulting, that the structural issues were honest mistakes. They'll drag this out until you're too tired or too broke to keep fighting. I'm not afraid of expensive lawyers, Victoria said. I can see that. But are you prepared for what this investigation will do to your business? The moment we execute search warrants, this becomes public. Your competitors will use it against you. Your investors will get nervous. Your ongoing projects will face additional scrutiny. I know, Victoria said quietly. I've thought about all of that. And I'm doing this anyway because it's right. Martinez studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded, something like respect crossing her features. All right, give me everything you've got. I'll start the investigation this afternoon. The press briefing at 3 p.m. felt like stepping into an arena. Victoria had called it herself, invited every major news outlet in the region, and prepared a statement that would end careers. Robert stood beside her at the podium, and somewhere in the back of the room, she spotted Ethan leaning against the wall, watching with his characteristic calm. Camera flashes popped as Victoria stepped to the microphone. Thank you for coming, she began, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. This morning, the Savannah City Council approved final permits for the Hale Development Corporation waterfront project. I'm grateful for their trust and confidence. However, there's something you need to know about how we earned that approval. The room went quiet, reporters sensing blood in the water. During construction, we discovered evidence of systematic sabotage. Someone deliberately compromised structural elements throughout the building in a pattern consistent with professional engineering knowledge. We hired an independent structural engineer to investigate, and what he found was disturbing. Victoria pulled up images on the screen behind her, Ethan's photographs of drilled-out bolt holes, weakened welds, and deliberately misaligned supports. These are not accidents. These are calculated attempts to make our building fail, and we believe we know who's responsible. She displayed the next slide, security footage of Dalton Briggs on site after hours. Dalton Briggs, owner of Briggs Construction, visited our construction site 3 weeks before sabotage began. He didn't log the visit. He examined locations that were later compromised. And his company received $500,000 in payments from shell companies we've traced to Kiernan Development Group. Gasps rippled through the room. Cameras swung toward where Thomas Kiernan sat in the third row, his face frozen in shock. We believe Mr. Kiernan paid Mr. Briggs to sabotage our project as retaliation for losing the waterfront property bid 2 years ago, and to damage Hale Development's reputation while enhancing his own. This morning, we provided all evidence to the Savannah Police Department. An investigation is underway. Kiernan stood abruptly. This is outrageous. These are baseless accusations from a desperate woman trying to explain away her own incompetence. Are they baseless? Victoria interrupted, her voice cutting through his bluster. Then explain the security footage. Explain the financial transfers. Explain why your shell companies paid Briggs Construction amounts well above market rate for the work performed. Those were legitimate consulting fees for projects completely unrelated to your development, Kiernan said, but his voice lacked conviction. Then I'm sure you won't mind providing detailed documentation to the police, Victoria said smoothly, along with explanations for why those payments coincide exactly with sabotage events at my construction site. Reporters shouted questions. Kiernan pushed through the crowd toward the exit, refusing to answer. Cameras followed him, and Victoria knew those images. His face tight with anger, his retreat from accountability, would lead every news broadcast that evening. When the briefing ended 45 minutes later, Victoria felt drained but victorious.
She'd done it. She'd gone public with everything, burned the bridges behind her, and committed fully to seeing this through to the end. Ethan appeared beside her as the room emptied. "That was impressive," he said. "Brutal, but impressive. Was it too much?" Victoria asked, suddenly uncertain. "Maybe I should have let the police handle it quietly." "No," Ethan said firmly. "Quiet investigations get quietly buried when people with money start making calls. Public investigations have accountability. You did the right thing. Even though it's going to make my life hell for the next 6 months." "Especially because of that," Ethan said. "Doing the right thing is supposed to cost something. If it didn't, everyone would do it." Victoria laughed despite the exhaustion. "That's a depressing philosophy." "It's an honest one." Ethan checked his watch. "I need to go. Maya has a piano recital tonight. She's playing a piece she's been practicing for 2 months, and I promised I'd be in the front row." "What's the piece?" "Fur-Elise. She can't quite hit all the notes yet, but she's determined." Ethan smiled, the expression transforming his usually serious face. "She gets that from her mother. Emma never gave up on anything." Victoria watched him head toward the exit, this man who investigated corporate conspiracies in the morning and attended piano recitals at night. The contrast should have seemed jarring, but somehow it made perfect sense. The next morning brought consequences. Victoria arrived at her office at 6:30 to find 3 messages from nervous investors, 2 calls from board members demanding explanations, and an email from her largest contractor threatening to pull out of a different project due to reputational concerns. She handled each with the calm professionalism that had built her company, but by 9 a.m., she felt the weight of what she'd started. Derek knocked on her office door looking haggard. "The crews are spooked," he said without preamble. "Half of them saw the news last night. They're asking if it's safe to work on the waterfront project, if the building's really been sabotaged." "It was sabotaged," Victoria said, "and it's been repaired. The building is safer now than most new construction in the city." "That's what I told them, but they want reassurance from someone with credentials." Derek hesitated. "Can Caldwell talk to them? If they hear it from the engineer who actually found and fixed the problems, it might calm things down." Victoria pulled out her phone and called Ethan. He answered on the second ring, his voice slightly distracted. "Caldwell? It's Victoria. I need a favor. My construction crews are nervous about safety after the press briefing. Can you come to the site this morning and speak with them? Give them professional reassurance that the building is sound." There was a pause. "What time?" 9:30. Another pause. Victoria could almost hear him calculating schedules, weighing priorities. "I can do 10. That gives me time to drop Maya at school and still make it work." "Thank you." "Victoria," Ethan said, his tone shifting to something more serious. "Are you okay? That briefing yesterday took guts, but it also painted a target on your back." "I'm fine," Victoria said automatically. "That wasn't a real answer." Victoria looked out her office window at the Savannah skyline. "I'm scared," she admitted quietly. "I just declared war on people with money and connections. I don't know what they'll do next." "They'll try to discredit you," Ethan said. "They'll leak stories about cost overruns, safety violations, anything to make you look incompetent. They'll pressure your investors and contractors. They'll make you regret going public. You're not helping. I'm being honest. But here's the other truth. You have something they don't. You have evidence, you have credibility, and you have people who believe in what you're building." Ethan's voice softened. "You're not alone in this fight, Victoria. Remember that." The call ended, but the words stayed with her. "You're not alone." When was the last time she'd actually believed that? Her whole career had been built on the assumption that she had to handle everything herself, that trust was a luxury and delegation was weakness. But Ethan had proven that wrong. He'd investigated when she asked. He'd repaired what was broken. He'd stood beside her in city council chambers and press briefings without asking for recognition or reward. Maybe she didn't have to carry everything alone. At 10 a.m., Ethan arrived at the construction site carrying a rolled blueprint and his tablet. The crew had gathered in the ground floor, about 40 workers in hard hats and steel-toed boots, looking skeptical and worried. Derek made introductions. "Everyone, this is Ethan Caldwell, the structural engineer who investigated the sabotage and oversaw repairs. He's here to answer your safety concerns." Ethan unrolled the blueprint on a makeshift table. I know you're worried, he said without preamble. You saw the news. You heard about sabotage. You're wondering if this building is going to kill you. The blunt acknowledgement seemed to catch the workers off guard. They'd expected corporate reassurance, not direct confrontation with their fears. The answer is no, Ethan continued. This building will not kill you, and I can prove it. He pulled up images on his tablet, the same ones Victoria had shown at the press briefing. These are the compromised elements: deliberately weakened supports, improperly installed bolts, welds designed to fail. Someone who understood structural engineering created these problems specifically to make the building collapse. A worker near the front raised his hand. If someone sabotaged it, how do we know they didn't sabotage other parts we haven't found? Because I looked, Ethan said simply. I spent 3 weeks examining every critical structural element in this building, every support beam, every weld, every connection. I x-rayed welds you can't see. I tested concrete you can't access. I checked load calculations against actual measurements, and I found every compromise. How can you be sure you found everything? Because sabotage follows patterns, Ethan explained. The people who did this weren't random. They targeted specific locations for maximum impact: the 4th floor where load distribution changes, connection points where failure would cascade. Once I understood their pattern, I could predict where else they'd strike, and I checked every single one of those locations. He pulled up a different image, a detailed schematic with green check marks throughout. These are all the critical points in the building. Green means inspected and verified safe. There are no red marks, no unchecked areas, no unknowns. Another worker spoke up. What about the stuff you fixed? How do we know the repairs are solid? Because I documented every repair with photographs, measurements, and material certifications. Ethan handed his tablet to the nearest worker. Scroll through those files. You'll see before and after images of every compromised element. You'll see the materials we used, all rated above code requirements. You'll see the installation process. And you'll see the final inspection results. The worker scrolled, his skepticism gradually shifting to something like respect. He passed the tablet to others, and Victoria watched the crowd's body language change as they reviewed the evidence. I have a daughter, Ethan said quietly. She's 7 years old. If I thought there was any chance this building would hurt the people working in it, I wouldn't let her visit on Saturdays. But she's been here. She's walked these floors. Because I know, not think, know, that this structure is sound. The workers exchanged glances. The mention of Ethan's daughter seemed to carry more weight than any technical specification. What about future sabotage? Someone asked. What if they try again? They won't, Ethan said. The people responsible are under criminal investigation. Police are monitoring the site. Every contractor access is logged and reviewed. And I'm here 3 times a week doing random spot checks. If anyone tries to compromise this building again, they'll be caught immediately. An older worker near the back, someone with the weathered look of 30 years in construction, raised his hand. I've worked on a lot of buildings, seen a lot of engineers. Most of them show up once, sign off on paperwork, and disappear. You're different. Why do you care so much? Ethan was quiet for a moment. Because buildings matter, he said finally. You're going to spend thousands of hours in this structure. People will work here, maybe live here. They're going to trust that when they walk through that door, the ceiling won't fall on them. That trust is sacred. When someone violates it through sabotage or negligence or greed, they're not just compromising steel and concrete. They're compromising human lives. And I won't be part of that. The silence that followed felt almost reverent. Then the older worker nodded and extended his hand. Good enough for me. Ethan shook it. One by one, other workers came forward with questions, technical, specific, the kind that showed they were genuinely trying to understand rather than just looking for reassurance. Ethan answered each with patience and detail, never talking down, never dismissing concerns. Victoria watched from the sidelines, impressed despite herself. She'd hired him for his engineering expertise, but this was different. This was leadership. The ability to transform fear into understanding, to build trust through honesty rather than false promises. By 11:30, the workers had dispersed back to their tasks, tension replaced by renewed focus. Derek approached Victoria, shaking his head in amazement. That was something, Derek said. I've never seen anyone handle a scared crew that effectively. He didn't sugarcoat anything, but somehow they left feeling better than when they arrived. He's good at his job, Victoria said.
He's more than good. He's genuine. Derek glanced at where Ethan was packing up his materials.
You should hold on to him. Engineers like that are rare.
Victoria knew Derek was right, but she also knew that holding on to Ethan meant respecting the boundaries he'd set. The 2 p.m. departure, the weekend sacred time, the life built around his daughter. She couldn't ask him to change those things without asking him to become someone else entirely. And she didn't want someone else. She wanted exactly who he was. Ethan approached as Derek walked away.
That went better than I expected, he said.
You were perfect, Victoria said. Honest but reassuring. They trusted you.
They trusted the evidence, Ethan corrected. I just made it accessible.
Still, thank you.
Victoria hesitated, then asked the question that had been nagging at her.
What you said in there about buildings being sacred trust, you really believe that?
Absolutely, Ethan said without hesitation.
My father was a steel worker. He spent 40 years welding beams on skyscrapers, never knowing the names of the people who'd work in them. But he knew his welds had to hold. He knew that someone's life depended on him doing his job right. He took that seriously.
Ethan's expression softened with memory. When I told him I wanted to be an engineer, he said, "Good. Make sure the people like me don't die because some architect wanted a pretty building." That stuck with me.
Victoria thought about her own father, a ruthless businessman who'd measured success in profit margins and market dominance. He'd never talked about sacred trust or protecting workers. He'd talked about winning, about crushing competition, about building empires. She'd followed his model for 20 years, and suddenly it felt hollow.
Your father sounds like a good man, Victoria said.
He was. Died of lung disease when I was 30. Spent too many years breathing metal dust without proper protection. Ethan's jaw tightened. That's another reason I care about safety. I watched what happens when companies cut corners to save money. It costs lives. I won't cut corners, Victoria promised. Not on this project. Not on any project. I believe you, Ethan said. Otherwise I wouldn't be here. He checked his watch. 11:45. I need to do a quick check on the 10th floor before I leave. Want to come along? Victoria found herself nodding, following him toward the temporary stairs. They climbed in comfortable silence, and Victoria realized she'd become accustomed to Ethan's quiet presence. He didn't fill silence with meaningless conversation. He was comfortable letting moments exist without narration. On the 10th floor, Ethan examined several connection points, running measurements and making notes. Victoria watched, no longer impatient with the methodical process. She was learning to appreciate precision. Everything looks good, Ethan said finally. The repairs are holding perfectly. Give it another month and you won't be able to tell there was ever a problem. Except for the 70-page report documenting every issue, Victoria said dryly. Except for that, Ethan agreed with a slight smile. How are you holding up after yesterday's briefing? Victoria leaned against a completed wall, considering the question. I'm tired, stressed, worried about what Kiernan and Briggs will do next, but also relieved. I spent weeks sitting on evidence that could destroy people's careers, and it felt like carrying poison. Now it's out there. Let the police and prosecutors handle it. Any regrets? None, Victoria said firmly. They tried to destroy something I built. They put workers at risk. They deserve whatever consequences come. Ethan nodded approval. Good. Don't second-guess yourself now. You made the right choice. Even though it's going to cost me? Kiernan's already spreading rumors. 2 investors called this morning asking if Hale Development is financially stable. My reputation is taking hits. Your reputation will recover, Ethan said. Kiernan's won't. There's a difference between being caught in a scandal and causing one. You're the victim who fought back. That's not weakness. That's strength. Victoria wanted to believe that. She wanted to trust that honesty and evidence would triumph over money and influence. What if they find a way to make this all go away? She asked quietly. What if Kiernan's lawyers convince prosecutors there's not enough evidence? What if he bribes the right people? Then we fight harder, Ethan said simply. We document more. We push louder. We don't quit. He met her eyes directly.
You asked me 3 weeks ago if I was willing to help you figure out who sabotaged your building. I said yes. That didn't come with an expiration date. I'm in this until it's finished. The simple declaration hit Victoria harder than any grand speech could have. Ethan wasn't making promises about guaranteed outcomes or easy victories. He was just committing to stay, to keep fighting, regardless of how hard it got. When was the last time someone had made that kind of commitment to her? Not to her company or her money or what she could do for them, but to her as a person trying to do the right thing. Thank you, Victoria said, and meant it more deeply than the words could convey. Ethan's phone buzzed. He checked it and smiled. Maya just texted. She wants to know if I can pick up sandwich supplies on the way home. Apparently we're making lunch together today. That sounds nice. It's her new thing. She watches cooking shows and then wants to recreate them. Ethan's expression held pure affection. Last week we made sushi. It looked terrible but tasted okay. This week is gourmet sandwiches, whatever that means. Victoria found herself smiling. Enjoy your gourmet sandwiches. I will. Ethan shouldered his bag. See you tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. 6 a.m., Victoria confirmed. She watched him descend the stairs, then stood alone on the 10th floor of her building, the building that had nearly been destroyed, that now stood stronger than ever, protected by evidence and engineering and the quiet determination of a man who believed buildings were sacred trust. The afternoon brought more investor calls, more nervous questions, more damage control, but Victoria handled each with newfound confidence. She had evidence, she had truth. She had Ethan's engineering expertise backing every claim. And she had something else, the growing certainty that she'd made the right choice, not just for her company, but for herself. Standing up to Kiernan and Briggs wasn't just about protecting profit margins. It was about refusing to let corruption win through intimidation. Her father would have handled this differently. He would have negotiated quietly, found leverage, made deals. He would have protected the company's reputation above everything else. But Victoria wasn't her father, and maybe that was exactly what she needed to be. The counterattack came faster than Victoria expected. Thursday morning, 2 days after the press briefing, she arrived at her office to find her assistant pale and shaking. A manila envelope sat on Victoria's desk, unmarked except for her name written in block letters. It was slipped under the door sometime after midnight, her assistant said. Security cameras show someone in a hoodie, no face visible. Victoria opened the envelope carefully. Inside were photographs, her leaving the construction site at night, her having dinner with business associates, her walking into her downtown office. Nothing illegal, nothing scandalous, but the message was clear. We're watching you. Attached to the photos was a single typed note. Accidents happen to people who make enemies. Drop the investigation. Victoria's hands trembled slightly as she read it, but anger quickly burned through the fear. She pulled out her phone and called Detective Martinez. I just received a threat, Victoria said when Martinez answered. Anonymous photos and a warning to drop the investigation. Don't touch anything else in that envelope, Martinez said immediately. I'm sending a forensics team. And Ms. Hale? Take this seriously. People who sabotage buildings don't stop at intimidation. I'm not dropping the investigation, Victoria said firmly. I didn't think you would, Martinez replied. But you need protection. I'm assigning a patrol car to monitor your office and home, and I'd recommend varying your daily routine. After the call ended, Victoria sat staring at the photographs spread across her desk. Someone had followed her, documented her movements, tried to make her afraid. It was working, but not in the way they intended. Fear was transforming into fury. She called Robert. I need security upgraded immediately, office, home, and construction site. And I need you to find out who delivered that envelope. Already on it, Robert said. I reviewed the footage the moment your assistant called me. The person was careful, covered face, gloves, probably disposed of the hoodie immediately after. But they made one mistake. What mistake? They arrived in a vehicle registered to a shell company. Same shell company that's been paying Briggs Construction. Robert's voice held grim satisfaction. They're getting sloppy. Desperate people make stupid mistakes. Can you trace it back to Kiernan? With enough time, yes. The registration paperwork will have signatures, addresses, connections. It's just a matter of following the thread. Victoria ended the call and tried to focus on work, but the photographs kept drawing her attention. Someone wanted her scared enough to quit. which meant the evidence was damaging enough to matter. Good. At noon, her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Ms. Hale. The voice was smooth, cultured, and coldly furious. Thomas Kiernan. We need to talk. I have nothing to say to you, Victoria said. Then listen. You've made a serious mistake going to the police with fabricated evidence and wild accusations. My lawyers are preparing a defamation lawsuit that will destroy what's left of your company's reputation. Fabricated evidence? Victoria laughed harshly. I have 70 pages of documented structural sabotage, financial records showing your payments to Briggs, and security footage of his unauthorized site visits. That's not fabrication. That's fact. That's circumstantial nonsense that proves nothing, Kiernan said. Those payments were for legitimate consulting on projects completely unrelated to your development. Briggs visited your site as a professional courtesy to check on his crew's work. And the structural issues were standard construction problems blown out of proportion by a paranoid woman and her incompetent engineer. Victoria felt ice in her veins. Ethan Caldwell is one of the finest structural engineers in this state. His credentials and expertise are beyond question. Are they? Kiernan's voice took on a nasty edge. Because I've done some research on Mr. Caldwell. Single father, works alone, takes only small projects. Sounds like someone whose career never recovered from whatever failure drove him to downsize. Not exactly the expert witness you want when this goes to court. You don't know anything about him, Victoria said, her voice dangerously quiet. I know he's a vulnerability, Kiernan said. I know that when my lawyers depose him, they'll dig into every project he's ever touched, every decision he's ever made. They'll find mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes, and they'll use those mistakes to destroy his credibility. Is that really what you want? To drag some washed-up engineer through the mud for a case you can't win? Victoria's grip tightened on her phone. Is that a threat? It's a reality check. Drop this investigation, issue a public statement saying the structural issues were resolved and blown out of proportion by overzealous media coverage, and I'll forget this ever happened. Keep pushing, and I'll bury you and everyone associated with you. I'm not dropping anything, Victoria said, and threatening Ethan Caldwell was the worst mistake you could make, because now this isn't just business, it's personal. She hung up before Kiernan could respond. Her hands shook with rage. Kiernan thought he could intimidate her by threatening Ethan. He thought she'd back down to protect someone she cared about. He was wrong, but the threat worried her anyway. Not because she doubted Ethan's expertise, but because Kiernan was right about one thing. Lawsuits could destroy reputations, even when you won. The process itself was the punishment. She needed to talk to Ethan, warn him what was coming. Victoria arrived at the construction site at 1:45, knowing Ethan would still be there for another 15 minutes. She found him on the 7th floor, examining newly installed HVAC supports. We need to talk, Victoria said without preamble. Ethan looked up, immediately reading her tension. What happened? She told him about the envelope, the photographs, the threatening note. Then she told him about Kiernan's call, including the threat to destroy Ethan's credibility through depositions and legal harassment. Ethan's expression remained calm throughout, but something hardened in his eyes. Let them try, he said simply. Ethan, they'll drag you through depositions. They'll question every decision you've ever made. They'll try to find any mistake you've made in 15 years of practice and use it to make you look incompetent. I know how legal harassment works, Ethan said. Emma's medical bills taught me. Insurance companies tried every tactic to avoid paying for her treatment. They questioned doctors, demanded second opinions, claimed experimental treatments weren't covered. They made our lives hell for 2 years. And I learned that the truth is stronger than harassment. My work speaks for itself. Every project I've completed stands without failure. Every calculation I've made is documented and defensible. If Kiernan's lawyers want to waste time trying to discredit me, they'll find nothing but clean work and professional integrity. Victoria wanted to believe that, but she'd seen good people destroyed by bad faith legal attacks. I don't want you hurt because of my fight, she said quietly. Ethan set down his tablet and looked at her directly. This stopped being just your fight the moment I found those sabotage supports. Someone compromised a building's structural integrity. They put workers at risk. They violated every principle of professional engineering. That makes it my fight too. But your reputation will be fine, Ethan said firmly. Because I have something Kiernan doesn't. I have documentation. I have methodology. I have 15 years of completed projects and satisfied clients.
What does Kiernan have? Money and lawyers. That's not enough to destroy truth. Victoria felt something release in her chest. She'd been so worried about protecting Ethan that she'd forgotten he didn't need protecting. He was strong enough to handle whatever came. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For not being afraid." Ethan smiled slightly. "I didn't say I wasn't afraid. I said I wasn't backing down. There's a difference." He checked his watch, 1:58. "I need to go get Maya." "But Victoria, be careful. Kiernan's desperate. Desperate people do stupid, dangerous things." "I know. Detective Martinez assigned police protection." "Good." Ethan shouldered his bag. "See you tomorrow morning." Victoria watched him leave, then stood alone on the 7th floor, surrounded by the building that had become the center of a war she hadn't asked for, but refused to lose. Friday brought unexpected developments. Detective Martinez called at 8 a.m., with news that made Victoria's pulse race. "We executed search warrants on Kiernan Development Group and Briggs Construction this morning," Martinez said. "Seized computers, financial records, phones. Kiernan's lawyers are screaming about overreach, but the warrants are solid. We'll have preliminary findings within a week." "What about the threatening letter?" "Forensics found partial prints on the envelope. They're running them against known associates of both Briggs and Kiernan, and the vehicle used for delivery has been impounded. We're checking it for additional evidence." Victoria felt hope rising. "So we have them." "We have evidence," Martinez corrected. "Whether it's enough to prosecute is up to the DA's office, but it's looking promising." The call ended, and Victoria allowed herself a moment of cautious optimism. The investigation was moving forward. Evidence was being collected. The system was working. Then her assistant buzzed. "Ms. Hale, there's someone here to see you. He says it's urgent. A Mr. Dalton Briggs." Victoria's optimism evaporated. "Send him in." Dalton Briggs entered her office looking nothing like the confident contractor she'd seen at city council meetings. He looked haggard, desperate, and cornered. He closed the door behind him without asking permission. "We need to make a deal," Briggs said without preamble. "I don't make deals with people who sabotaged my building," Victoria said coldly. "Then you're about to watch an innocent man go to prison," Briggs said. "Because I didn't sabotage anything. I was paid to look the other way while someone else did." Victoria's attention sharpened. "Explain." Briggs sat down heavily in the chair across from her desk. 6 months ago, I got a call from someone claiming to represent a potential investor. They offered me $200,000 to ignore certain installation irregularities on your project. Faulty bolts, misaligned supports, weak welds. I was supposed to sign off on the work without inspecting it closely. "Who paid you?" "I don't know. Everything was handled through intermediaries. Money showed up in offshore accounts. I never met anyone face to face." Briggs ran a hand through his hair. "I thought it was just corner cutting. Rich developers trying to save money by using cheap materials. I've seen it 100 times. I didn't realize they were actively sabotaging the structure." "That's a convenient story," Victoria said, "and completely unprovable." "It's the truth," Briggs said desperately. "I'm a contractor, not an engineer. I can tell when a weld looks bad, but I can't calculate load distribution or identify deliberate structural weaknesses. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. They needed an engineer." Victoria's blood went cold. Ethan had said the same thing. The sabotage showed professional engineering knowledge. "Do you know which engineer?" she asked. "No, but I know Kiernan has a structural engineer on staff, a guy named Marcus Webb. He worked for Morrison Engineering before Kiernan hired him away 2 years ago." Morrison Engineering, the same firm Victoria had used before hiring Ethan. "Webb would have had access to my building plans," Victoria said slowly. "He would have known the critical structural points. He would have understood exactly where to compromise the building for maximum damage. And he would have known how to train my crews to install supports incorrectly without them realizing what they were doing," Briggs added. "I thought the specifications were just weird design choices. I didn't know they were engineered to fail." Victoria stood and walked to her window, looking out at Savannah's skyline. Another engineer, someone with the same credentials as Ethan, the same training, the same knowledge, but using it to destroy instead of protect. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked without turning around.
Because the police seized my records this morning. They're going to find the payments, the offshore accounts, everything. I'm already facing criminal charges. But if I cooperate, if I testify against Kiernan and Webb, the DA might reduce my sentence. Briggs' voice cracked slightly. I have a family, Ms. Hale. 2 kids in college. I made a stupid, greedy mistake, but I'm not a saboteur. I'm just a contractor who looked the other way. Victoria turned to face him. You looked the other way while people's lives were put at risk. Workers who trusted that the building they were working in wouldn't collapse. Future tenants who would have trusted that the structure was safe. Your greed could have killed them. I know, Briggs said quietly, and I'll have to live with that. But Kiernan and Webb are the real criminals here. They planned this. They orchestrated it. I was just a tool they used. Tell it to Detective Martinez, Victoria said. She's the one you need to convince, not me. Briggs stood slowly. I'm meeting with her and the DA this afternoon. I'm going to tell them everything I know. Dates, payments, conversations. All of it. He met Victoria's eyes. For whatever it's worth, I'm sorry. I should have asked more questions. I should have inspected more carefully. I should have been better. Yes, Victoria said simply. You should have. After Briggs left, Victoria immediately called Ethan. He answered with his usual calm greeting, but she could hear Maya singing in the background. It's Friday afternoon, Victoria said. I know you're with Maya, but I need to tell you something important. Can you talk? Hold on. There was rustling, then a door closing. Okay, Maya's watching a movie. What's wrong? Victoria explained Briggs' visit, his claim about being paid to look the other way, and the revelation about Marcus Webb. Webb, Ethan said slowly. I know that name. He graduated from Georgia Tech 2 years after me. Good student, brilliant actually, but he had a reputation for cutting ethical corners. Failed a professional responsibility course because he plagiarized a design project. Could he have engineered the sabotage? Absolutely. He's smart enough. And if he's working for Kiernan, he'd have the motive. Ethan was quiet for a moment. This actually makes more sense than Briggs doing it alone. The sabotage was too sophisticated for someone without engineering training. So we have 2 enemies. Kiernan providing the money and motive, Webb providing the technical expertise, and Briggs providing the access and plausible deniability, Ethan finished. It's a smart setup. If they'd gotten away with it, the building would have failed. You'd have been blamed for poor oversight, and Kiernan would have looked competent by comparison. Except they didn't get away with it, Victoria said, because you found the sabotage. We found it, Ethan corrected. You hired me. You trusted the evidence. You went public when it would have been easier to stay quiet. This is as much your victory as mine. The word victory felt premature, but Victoria appreciated the sentiment. Briggs is meeting with the DA this afternoon, she said. If he testifies against Kiernan and Webb, we might actually win this. We will win this, Ethan said with quiet certainty. The truth is on our side. That's all that matters. After the call ended, Victoria tried to focus on other work, but her mind kept circling back to Marcus Webb, an engineer using his knowledge to destroy. The betrayal felt personal in a way that Kiernan's greed didn't. Engineers were supposed to build, to protect, to ensure safety. Webb had violated all of that for money. The thought made her appreciate Ethan even more. He could have made far more money working for large firms, could have compromised ethics for profit like Webb had. But he'd chosen integrity over income, even when it cost him. That choice had led him to her construction site at midnight, to 3 weeks of meticulous investigation, to standing beside her when threats started coming. She owed him more than she could express. The following Tuesday, Detective Martinez called with news that changed everything. Briggs's testimony was enough for the DA, Martinez said. We're filing criminal charges against Thomas Kiernan for conspiracy to commit fraud and reckless endangerment. Marcus Webb is being charged with criminal sabotage and professional misconduct. The Georgia State Board of Engineers is also reviewing Webb's license. Victoria felt triumph surge through her. When? Arrests are happening this afternoon. We wanted to give you advance warning in case there's media attention. Thank you, Detective. Thank you for having the courage to come forward, Martinez said. Cases like this don't get solved when victims stay quiet. You did the right thing. Victoria ended the call, and immediately contacted Ethan. He was at the construction site, finishing his morning inspection. "They're arresting Kiernan and Webb this afternoon," Victoria said. "It's over. We won." "The criminal case is beginning," Ethan corrected, ever precise. "The trial will take months, maybe years. But yes, we've won the important part. The truth came out. Justice is moving forward. The building is safe." "Can you meet me at the site?" Victoria asked. "I want to celebrate. Not with champagne or press conferences, just acknowledgement of what we accomplished." "Give me an hour," Ethan said. "I need to drop Maya at her friend's house for a play date. Then I'm all yours." 90 minutes later, Victoria and Ethan stood on the roof of the waterfront development, looking out at the Savannah River. The building was nearly complete now, windows installed, exterior finished, interior work progressing on schedule. It stood strong and beautiful, exactly as Victoria had envisioned. "Thank you," Victoria said, "for everything, for investigating, for documenting, for standing beside me when everyone else thought I was overreacting." "I didn't do anything special," Ethan said. "I just did my job." "No," Victoria said firmly. "You did more than your job. You worked nights to repair sabotage without asking for extra payment. You calmed frightened workers. You testified before city council. You stood up to Kiernan's threats. That's not just doing a job. That's integrity." Ethan looked uncomfortable with the praise. "Anyone with ethics would have done the same." "But they didn't. You did." Victoria turned to face him fully. "I want to hire you permanently, not as a consultant, as my chief structural engineer. Every project Hale Development takes on, you oversee. Full salary, benefits, complete creative control over structural decisions, and you still leave at 2 p.m. every day to be with Maya." Ethan blinked, clearly surprised. "That's a generous offer." "It's a selfish offer," Victoria admitted. "I want someone I trust making sure my buildings stand. Someone who cares about safety more than profit. Someone who won't compromise integrity for convenience." "What about my current clients?" "Hire associates to handle the small projects. Build the firm you've always been capable of running. I'll provide the financial backing." Victoria had thought this through carefully. "You've been working alone because it was easier to control your schedule. But if you had people you trusted, people who shared your values, you could expand without sacrificing time with Maya." Ethan was quiet, considering. Victoria could see him working through logistics, weighing priorities, calculating how this would change his carefully structured life. "I'd need to think about it," he said finally. "Talk to Maya. Figure out the details." "Take all the time you need," Victoria said. "The offer stands whenever you're ready." They stood in silence, watching boats move slowly down the river. The city spread out before them, full of buildings that either stood or fell, based on the integrity of the people who designed them. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan said after a while. "Anything." "Why did you really go public with the investigation? You could have handled it quietly, negotiated settlements, avoided all the media attention and investor panic. Why risk everything for something that might not have succeeded?" Victoria thought about her father, about the empire he'd built on ruthless competition and moral compromise, about the lessons he'd taught her and the ones she'd had to unlearn. "Because I was tired of winning the wrong way," she said honestly. "My father taught me that business was war, that you did whatever it took to win, that ethics were luxuries you couldn't afford if you wanted to succeed." She looked at the building standing strong before them. "But you showed me something different. You showed me that integrity isn't a luxury, it's a foundation. And buildings built on bad foundations eventually fall, no matter how impressive they look." Ethan smiled slightly. "That's a good metaphor. I learned from the best." They stayed on the roof until the sun started setting, talking about buildings and foundations, and the difference between structures that stood and structures that merely looked like they stood. By the time Victoria drove home that evening, she felt something she hadn't felt in years: peace. Not the temporary satisfaction of a deal closed or a profit made, but genuine peace that came from knowing she'd done the right thing even when it cost her. The next morning brought news that Thomas Kiernan and Marcus Webb had been arrested without incident. Their photos appeared on every news channel. Kiernan in handcuffs looking furious, Webb looking shocked and broken. Victoria's phone exploded with calls from investors, contractors, and business associates. But this time, the calls were different. Instead of nervous questions, she received congratulations. Instead of doubt, she received respect. "I always knew you had integrity," one longtime investor said. "But standing up to Kiernan when he tried to destroy you? That takes courage. I'm doubling my investment in Hale Development." Another contractor called to offer his services. "I've worked with companies that look the other way when problems arise. I want to work with someone who faces problems head on." By noon, Victoria had received 3 new project proposals, 2 partnership offers, and an invitation to speak at a construction industry conference about ethical development. Her reputation hadn't been destroyed by the investigation. It had been enhanced. Derek appeared in her office doorway around 1 p.m., grinning. "Have you seen the news coverage? You're being called a crusader for construction safety. The developer who chose integrity over profit. This is incredible PR." "It's not PR," Victoria said. "It's just the truth." "Well, the truth is selling," Derek said. "I've had 4 potential clients reach out this morning asking if Hale Development is taking on new projects. They specifically mentioned your commitment to safety and ethical construction." Victoria felt satisfaction that had nothing to do with profit margins. She'd proven that doing the right thing didn't have to mean sacrificing success. Sometimes it actually meant building something stronger. That afternoon, she drove to Magnolia Elementary School. She'd never done this before, never inserted herself into Ethan's carefully protected time with his daughter. But she had something important to say, and it couldn't wait. She found Ethan in the parking lot at 2:55, 5 minutes early as always, leaning against his truck with his thermos of coffee. "Victoria," he said, surprised. "What are you doing here?" "I wanted to tell you something before I lost my nerve," Victoria said. She took a deep breath. "I've spent 20 years building a company. I've made millions of dollars, developed dozens of properties, earned respect in my industry, but I've never built anything that mattered the way you've built what you have with Maya." Ethan's expression softened. "Victoria, let me finish," she said. "You could have been one of the top engineers in the country. You have the skills, the intelligence, the credentials. But instead, you chose to be present for your daughter, to pick her up from school every day, to make gourmet sandwiches and attend piano recitals. And you never apologized for it. You never treated it like a compromise or a sacrifice. You treated it like the most important work you do." "It is the most important work I do," Ethan said simply. "I know, and watching you do it has taught me something about foundations." Victoria smiled. "Buildings need solid foundations to stand, but so do people. Maya is your foundation, and the strength you draw from being her father is what makes you the engineer you are, the person you are." "Where's this going?" Ethan asked gently. Victoria hesitated, then said what she'd come to say. "I'd like to get to know you both better, not as employer and consultant, as friends. Maybe more than friends eventually, if that's something you'd want. But I need you to know I understand the boundaries. Maya comes first, always, and I respect that completely." Ethan studied her for a long moment, his serious eyes searching her face for something. Finally, he smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine. "Maya's been asking about you," he said. "She wants to know if the building lady would come to dinner sometime. She's planning to make her gourmet spaghetti." Victoria felt her heart lift. "I would love that. Tomorrow night, 6:30? I'll be there." The school bell rang. Within moments, children poured out of the building, loud and energetic and beautifully chaotic. Maya spotted her father immediately and ran over, pigtails flying. Then she saw Victoria and stopped, suddenly shy. "Hi, Miss Victoria," Maya said. "Hi, Maya," Victoria replied. "Your dad tells me you make excellent gourmet sandwiches." Maya's face lit up. "Do you want to come try my spaghetti? I learned how to make it from a cooking show. It has 17 ingredients." "A 17?" Victoria said, impressed. "That sounds amazing. I'd love to try it." "Tomorrow night," Ethan confirmed. "If you don't mind eating at a 7-year-old's preferred dinner time." 6:30 is perfect," Victoria said. She watched them walk to Ethan's truck together, Maya chattering about her day while Ethan listened with patient attention. Before they drove away, Maya waved at Victoria through the window, and Victoria waved back. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Victoria Hale wasn't thinking about profit margins or construction schedules or investor presentations. She was thinking about tomorrow night, about gourmet spaghetti with 17 ingredients, about getting to know a man who fixed buildings and raised his daughter with equal dedication, about building something that wasn't made of steel and concrete but might be even stronger. 6 months later, the waterfront development opened to spectacular reviews. The grand opening celebration drew hundreds of people: investors, city officials, construction workers who'd built it, and citizens excited to see Savannah's newest landmark. Victoria stood on the completed plaza, watching people marvel at the building's design and craftsmanship. Ethan stood beside her, wearing a suit for the occasion, but still looking slightly uncomfortable in formal clothes.
"It's beautiful," Ethan said, "and it'll stand for 100 years, maybe more." "Because you made sure the foundation was solid," Victoria said. "We made sure," Ethan corrected. Nearby, Maya played with other children on the new waterfront promenade, running and laughing without a care in the world. She wore a dress Victoria had helped her pick out the previous weekend during their first official shopping trip together. The past 6 months had been a revelation. Victoria had learned that Ethan made terrible coffee, but excellent pancakes. That Maya had strong opinions about everything from sea turtles to symphony music. That Sunday mornings at their house involved elaborate breakfasts and even more elaborate discussions about whatever Maya was currently interested in. She'd learned that being part of someone's life meant showing up. Not just for the big moments, but for the small ones. Piano recitals and school projects and grocery shopping trips. And she'd learned that the love she'd thought she'd sacrificed for her career had just been waiting for the right foundation. Thomas Kiernan and Marcus Webb had pled guilty to reduced charges 3 months ago. Kiernan faced 5 years in prison and the complete destruction of his development empire. Webb lost his engineering license permanently and faced additional prison time. Briggs received a suspended sentence in exchange for his testimony and community service. The criminal case was over, justice had been served. But more importantly, the building stood. Proof that integrity wasn't just an abstract concept, it was literally structural. When you built on truth, on honest work, on doing things the right way even when it was harder, you created something that lasted. Derek approached with champagne glasses. "The investors want to make a toast. They're calling this the most successful project launch in company history." Victoria accepted a glass, then handed one to Ethan. Maya ran over, and Victoria gave her sparkling cider instead. "To the building that almost wasn't," Derek announced to the gathered crowd, "and to the people who made sure it stands." Everyone raised their glasses. Victoria looked at Ethan, who looked at Maya, who grinned up at both of them with pure joy. "To foundations," Victoria said quietly, "just for them." "To foundations," Ethan agreed. They clinked glasses as the sun set over the Savannah River, painting the new building in shades of gold and amber. Around them, people celebrated success measured in profit and prestige. But Victoria celebrated something different. She celebrated the man who'd taught her that the strongest structures were built on integrity. The little girl who'd taught her that the most important work happened between 3 p.m. and bedtime. The journey from midnight crisis to sunset celebration. She celebrated the choice to do right even when wrong was easier. To stand firm when others wanted her to fall. To build on truth instead of compromise. The building would stand for 100 years, but the foundation she'd built with Ethan and Maya, the one made of trust and respect and showing up when it mattered, that would last even longer. Later that evening, after the celebration ended and the crowds dispersed, Victoria found herself back at the construction site with Ethan. Maya had gone home with Robert's wife for a sleepover, giving them a rare evening alone. They stood in the completed lobby, surrounded by polished marble and soaring glass, the building silent and peaceful. "Do you remember the first night?" Victoria asked. "When I found you here at midnight fixing supports I didn't know were broken. I remember thinking you were either very brave or very stubborn to climb those temporary stairs in heels," Ethan said with a slight smile. "Both," Victoria admitted. "I was terrified the building would fall, terrified I'd lose everything I'd built. But you didn't." "No," Victoria agreed. "I lost some things. Investors who valued profit over integrity, contractors who wanted shortcuts, the illusion that success meant never showing weakness. But I gained more than I lost." She turned to face him directly. "I gained you and Maya, and the understanding that the strongest foundation isn't made of concrete. It's made of choices. Choosing right over easy. Choosing truth over convenience. Choosing to show up every day for the people and things that matter." Ethan reached for her hand. "You know what I remember about that first night? The way you didn't ask my credentials or demand references. You just watched me work and decided to trust me. Best decision I ever made, Victoria said. Second best, Ethan corrected. The best was standing up to Kiernan when you could have stayed quiet. Third best, Victoria said. The best was accepting your dinner invitation 6 months ago. The second best was showing up every day since. Ethan smiled and pulled her closer. We're going to argue about rankings, aren't we? Probably, Victoria said. I'm very competitive. I've noticed. Ethan kissed her softly. But I think I can handle it. They stood together in the empty building, surrounded by the structure they'd saved and the foundation they'd built. Outside, Savannah continued its evening rhythm. Boats on the river, cars on the streets, people living lives built on their own foundations. Some foundations were solid, some weren't. But Victoria knew hers would stand, because it was built on truth, protected by integrity, and strengthened every day by the choice to do right, even when wrong was easier. The building would serve the city for generations. But the life she'd built with Ethan, with his unwavering principles and Maya's joyful presence, that was the structure that truly mattered, and it would stand forever.